Hello everyone, my name is Zach Carlins, and this is the June status update for WIC. And I know we went a little long in the last status update, and we want to make sure that we don't make the same mistake twice, so let's go ahead and get right into it. So our commitments from the last status update were these that you see on the screen, and we've made a few adjustments like we usually do. And those two adjustments are making the main priority for animations being the respawn animation, and then also starting our cinematics. And that was a big priority for us, and we'll talk about that later on in the presentation. Now we're able to get all this done. I don't know, Contact Keanu's been on this since the beginning, maybe for the last status update, who knows. For the June status update extras, we've been working real hard on some extra things as well. So we've been starting our optimization, did full profiling on the game. We started implementing our first pass at the cinematic scenes. Got Mark Crawl idle in there, also some checkpoint notifications, and some UI using Jean's head as well. So the big thing that we've been doing for the entire past month is preparing for alpha, and that's been the goal for this entire, since the last status update. Been pushing to alpha. So what you're seeing here is a sheet that shows all the different tasks that are needed to be able to call our team alpha. Now we've been tracking these consistently for the past month and preparing to see when we're targeting our alpha date for our game. And we've been hyper aware of all the things that need to go in to be able to have a shippable game that we can call alpha. As you see, we're tracking all this with time log, time estimation, the remaining amount of hours left, and what we're cutting, what we're keeping from this. So now what you're seeing is a very special burn down chart for the critical path chain. The green trend line is showing the capacity of the people who are working on the last remaining alpha tasks with some of their weekly hours. That is a max capacity, and there's 12 people that are doing alpha tasks right now, and that's why our max capacity for 15 hours a week is so high. What you're seeing on the yellow is our hours remaining until we can reach alpha. And right now we're under our 70-hour mark, and we have just about 6 days left. 12 tasks in progress, and also 18 tasks remaining. And that is where we're at with that. And we're going to go ahead and talk about all the different things that we've had to prepare to be able to have an alpha build, such as our wax pools, the attack, cinematic scenes, level iteration, profiling, pre-alpha playtest, and also bug testing. We're going to go ahead and start right with the wax pools. Now, you saw the wax pools in the last status update, and a lot of people said they look like pancakes. And we knew that because you saw the wax pools at that point in our development phase. They were still in progress without the art pass. The phase that you were at, that you saw them at the last status update with, was that we were using this spline tool here for the LEDs to be able to place them in the level anywhere they wanted for gameplay purposes, and they could shape them however they wanted to be able to guide the player to certain areas. After they replaced all the different wax pools, it was then up to the art team to then make the wax look like wax and not pancakes anymore. So because so many of these wax pools had very specific gameplay features, we had to be very specific with the way that we basically arted them out. We had some generic wax pools that could be made, just generically, but some of these had to be flowing in certain directions and also had to have length or angles to point to specific areas in the levels. So we have these screenshots that you see on the screen right now that was given to the artist. And then we also did draw overs on top of these showing the direction of the wax pools that they needed to go, the shape they needed to be, and not stopping creativity, but just showing the shape and size proportion that they needed to be for the environment. And then what our end result is these cool looking wax pools here that you see in engine now, and you'll go ahead and see it in the game later on. And then another thing that we needed to do was be able to notify the player that you were actually gaining wax in these wax pools. Otherwise, you're just standing there and you might get a glimpse that, you're gaining wax. So the way that we're doing this is with this cool little particle effect that's sparkly and rewarding to the player to allow them to know, hey, I'm gaining wax right now. And again, you'll notice here that it actually stops when Jean hits full health as well. And then it stops because he's full health. And again, you'll see this in the game later on. Now for the attack. In Alpha, we had multiple different types of attacks initially planned, like these two here, the high and the low. However, the way that we made the Legione, they will always come from high up and go straight down on the Jean, which means that the high attack animation was the one that we needed to choose out of these two. There were also a couple things here to notice that needed to be planned out in order to have this attack be implemented correctly. One was that the Legione needed to stop in front of Jean before they attacked, or give some type of brief pause to allow the player to have the opportunity to hit them. So that animation that you saw of the Legione attacking, where he was drawing backwards, that is that pause or second that Jean has the opportunity to attack him, as you can see in this video. We have a pause in that video to show where that drawback is, and I'll go ahead and play it again for you. And there's the pause, he's reeling back, giving Jean the opportunity to attack and stun them. Now for our cinematics. We had 3 cinematics planned since the very beginning of our game. The beginning cinematic, the Doubter Sneak checkpoint tutorialization, and also our ending cinematic. So, of course, how we start any type of new design or development process with our team, we have a team meeting. We talked about the layout and how we wanted to finish the game, start the game, and basically how we wanted these animations to work in the levels. And then that moved right out to the LDs laying out the scene and setting it up in a way that allows for enough space for the animation and for us to figure out, again, how we want these cinematics to occur. As you see here, this is for the beginning cinematic when you spawn. Jean will be laying on his side because the monk dropped the candelabra that Jean was on. Jean was on his side, gets up, touches the monk's hand, and the player will gain control. So that is that space that's prepped for that scene. We also are doing the exact same thing for our ending cinematic. As you see here, the scene was set and prepared, and now we have good reference for when we go ahead and go into that mocap studio. Now, the mocap studio was a problem for us because when we first shot all of our animations in the very beginning of the game at the mocap studio, we didn't shoot the cinematics because we wanted to see how the levels would pan out first, and then we could decide how we wanted these cinematics to work. So, of course, the coronavirus hit, and we, did not have access to the mocap studio. And we were, on the breaking point of having to either cut these animations or find a way to get in, and we found a way to get into the mocap studio. And when we got in there finally, we had the scene set up on the computer to reference as we were in the studio to know how we needed to walk around these spaces correctly. We took multiple takes as well. And then we had the mocap cleaned up and then implemented into that scene. It runs and can ship out as it is. However, we'll be polishing these throughout alpha. You will see the implemented cinematic scene in the engine during our demo here. And we'll give you a little taste. We're not going to show you this whole thing because you will see it in the game later on. That's all you get. You'll see the rest in the game. Now for our level iterations. Specifically, our Catacombs. At the last status update, we had a lot of feedback about the Catacombs just not fitting the game, seeming too slow, too dark, and we were also getting similar feedback from EA Day from the employees. A lot of what they said was that the camera had funky moments, you could never see Mara, it was just way too hard, specifically the maze part at the very end of the Catacombs. And, of course, we had to come up with some solutions. The main one was focusing on playability and gameplay over the aesthetic. We were so, brought in by the claustrophobia, and, we had to remove some of that claustrophobia in order to, as a sacrifice, just to make room for better gameplay and for it just to feel better in these areas. We'll be also adding more colored light to draw the player to these areas as well. and also making Mara more consistent. So this way you can always know where Mara is always and be able to understand where she probably can be. Even if you can't see her, you can hear her or have an idea of where her path is. We've also been working on a playtest profiling tool. On Steam, we need a min spec requirement, and we didn't want our suited up laptops as the min spec requirement on Steam. So we started doing research on how to estimate a min spec system. And a common way to test this is by having a variety of older hardware and testing on those. However, because of our situation with the coronavirus and the people that are doing this profiling testing, we don't have access to those types of systems. Again, especially in the environment that we're currently in. So we needed another solution that could help us get a look into how well our game is running on other systems and also be able to get a min-spec system at the exact same time. So we have our playtesters, so why not use them? During the playtest, we are tracking average FPS, the min and max FPS, and then also the percentage of time that players are at different FPS, specifically 60-45 and also 30. And then this way, specifically for Steam purposes, we'll be able to determine a min-spec system using this data. At the exact same time, we'll be able to see how the game is running on these systems as well, other than our own. And we're doing this via a survey. Again, with profiling, we've been profiling our game a bunch these past couple months. Again, from the very beginning, we've had a lot of comments and concerns about our game because of us having a dynamic light as the main character, having a dark environment with lots of particle effects, and we've been doing the best we can to make it as optimized as possible. And at the past status update, our average FPS was about 48.98 FPS. But then we started looking into unloading Legione when they were not in the scene and refactored some of their blueprints. And because of that, we've actually gained FPS up to 58.68 FPS. We've gained about 10 frames. And even then, there are a few more things that we can do with the Legione AI that we can refactor even more. And we're also looking into unloading Mara when she's not near Jean to even further allow lower end systems to be able to play our game effectively. Again, for pushing to alpha, we've talked about the wax pools, the attack, the cinematic scenes, level iteration, profiling, and now what's left is the pre-alpha playtest and also bug testing. For the pre-alpha playtest, we targeted June 15th as the date to ship. However, we did not ship that date, we shipped June 19th. We got some feedback from the EA employees, and we really wanted to get some of their feedback addressed before sending out our build. Some of the feedback that you just heard from the Catacombs specifically was due to this. And so for this playtest, we shipped out to 100 people, with 45% of these people being ones who had game dev experience. And again, the goal of this was to test our gameplay loop, the melting, the pathing, Mara and Legione. And we just started receiving a bunch of feedback from our last playtest. It has been in circulation for a week as of today, but here's a glance at our feedback. For the melting specifically, players are very worried about keeping their wax as full as possible. It was very obvious from the results of our survey. So when asked which of the two was more of a priority when you were playing, keeping my wax full as possible or hiding from Mara, there's an overwhelming more than half of the players more worried about keeping their wax as full as possible, which is something that we wanted as a team. We wanted the fact that you were melting the entire game to be a stressful experience on top of having to hide from this, big scary AI. Now, I had a pretty neutral feeling on the melting. We've been trying to see, because we upped our melting speed, which you'll see in the game later on. We've been trying to see if we're melting at a pretty good rate. It's neutral right now, so we're not entirely happy with this, but we will be watching the replays as we get more of the feedback in the next week or so to be able to see if we're melting and how many times people are dying in different areas, and if they're dying because of melting or if they're just dying because Mara killed them. However, most of the players are agreeing that there are enough wax pools to be able to keep them alive throughout the different levels. Which we can assume that the melting rate is in a pretty decent spot right now if they say that they're able to, stay alive because of these wax pools. If they were both low, then we'll say, okay, we got to either add more wax pools or, we got to make the melting slower, or maybe both. And that's all the things that we'll be doing within the next week and a half. For the pathing, we asked this at the last status update, this specific question. Did you make it to the thank you for playing screen? And if you remember, we had a very overwhelming yes, and that was because we ended up pushing the players to the level if they died too many times at each candelabra to force them to be able to see all the content in the game. We removed those training wheels for this playtest, and basically gave them the full game. And of course, we expected less people to be able to make it to the end of the game, and that's why we're testing the melting rate and also how many times they're dying and where they're dying. But something to notice here, the people who made it to the end, 100% of the time were ones who had game dev experience. So all the game devs made it to the end. However, the ones who did not have game dev experience were the ones that were having a difficult time making it to the end. So before, we had game devs not making it to the end, even with this training wheels, and now we're getting all of them to the end, which is great. And now we're getting more than half of people who do not have game dev experience to the end. And, we just probably have to tweak a little bit more of those numbers, and we'll be at a pretty good rate. And we'll be doing another play test when we hit our alpha build as well. So, some of these solutions that we want to implement to be able to get more players to the end of the game. We'll be adding more color light again to help guide the player, as you can see in these images on the right. We'll be watching replays to see where players are getting stuck the most as well. Adding more objects to help guide the player on the floor. And now moving to Mara. Specifically, players thought with Mara that they were safe, but they were not. But they actually were not. And players felt there were times that Mara should not have killed them. So, this is just having to work with the AI and making it more consistent and making it feel better for the player. And that's something that we are actively working with. We contribute a lot of this to the fact that players thinking that they are in a hidey hole when they're actually not, or when Mara reaches under to, when she follows Jean to a wax trail, basically following Jean's wax to a wax trail, which right now is obvious that it's not, obvious enough to the player. And that is something that we're going to be working on during alpha to see how we can polish things to make them very clear to the player that, hey, Mara's following my wax trail right now. I got to get out of this hidey hole. Also, when asked which mechanic, the buddy, the flame growth, or the doubter that they use the most, the doubter sneak is the overwhelming majority of the players that ended up, playing it. And we also want the buddy to be used more often. And we also think that using the buddy with Mara specifically will help players when they are hidden as well and make it feel better for when Mara is trying to grab them. Some of the things that we're going to do to make the buddy actually feel better as well will be making the buddy cost less wax. We'll be also making Mara's interaction with the buddy more consistent, and these should help incentivize the player to use the buddy more often. Because right now, players are not feeling that Mara is detecting the buddy well enough, or for it to be useful enough for the player to even use it. Now for alpha things, what are we going to be working on? We're going to be doing a lot of bug testing and a lot of bug bashing. So this past week, we did a bug testing competition. We worked with some of the developers from the IGQA team, and we gave them 2 hours to find as many bugs as possible, with the winner winning a prize. And basically the prize was a motivation for them to find as many possible bugs as they possibly could within the 2 hours, and to be as nitpicky as possible, because that's what we want as a team. We want every tiny little bug and make this game as polished as we can. And for us, this was an incredible learning experience, because most of us have never worked with a QA team before, and we got to be able to work, really closely with them, and they were extremely helpful. And also, this gives us a great base and template to how to do bug testing in the future, going forward with the IGQA team, because we do have a confirmation for another bug test with the IGQA team when we hit alpha. And as you see in the graph, these are the different types of bugs that the QA team actually found. We did pretty good. We do want more bugs though to make the build cleaner, and this is basically just the first look at this data, and we will get as many of these bugs done as we can. But you can see the 2.56% was the showstopper. And this bug was actually really good for the QA team to find, and this is why it's great to be able to use a QA team like this. One of the bugs that we got was an instance where we have a cinematic planned in this exact scene that you see on the screen. When you jump on this table, the cinematic starts. But, Jean is still melting. And if he doesn't get to the wax pool in time, by the time he dies, like and he isn't able to refill his health, the cinematic still plays, but the game just breaks. So it's these bugs that we're able to find with this QA team, the little ones, and be able to make this experience as great for the players we possibly can, especially since we're also shipping out the Steam. Now for bug tracking and testing, again, on average for our team, one bug takes around about 3 hours to finish. Now, that is 5 bugs per week per developer for a 15-hour week, with a minimum of 3 developers that we want working on bugs all the time till the end of the project when we hit alpha. With a total of 39 bugs the QA team found, and our content lock being July 20th, 11 days from the ship date, we have 4 weeks until our content lock as of today. Meaning that we're able to get around about 60 bugs within that time. Meaning that we have more capacity for more bugs going forward, and not just these 39 that we got from the first session. Because like I said, we're going to be doing another session with them, and we're going to hopefully be able to get most of those bugs as well. All based on priority, of course. Now for our July commitments. This is where I usually have our commitments for the next status update. But we will have a completed shippable build to Steam by the next presentation. And for the Steam pipeline, basically, as you see here, reviewing the product build, they're suggesting that you basically accommodate for 3 to 5 business days for them to review the build and possibly send it back to you. So we're going to be releasing a week prior to the status update in preparation of this waiting period, and we'll be shipping to Steam Wednesday, July 22nd, and then it should be up during the presentation on July 31st. So I will see you guys in the July status update. Thank you so much, and we're going to go ahead and move over to the Wick game.